Good afternoon, all. This is Drishti from People Matters, and we are back with an exciting session. Today's session is in partnership with Insights on the topic Beyond Skilling, Building a Resilient and Collaborative Workforce. The economies are shifting from an age of production to an age of imagination. The success of organizations in the rapidly changing business environment of today increasingly depends on innovation, resilience, entrepreneurship, collaboration, and other human skills which are less quantifiable. But they are very crucial. While business and HR leaders realize the importance of these human skills, they often find it highly difficult to identify them and then cultivate them among their workforce. To help you better understand your workforce and build a more relevant and impactful development plan for them by inculcating the qualities of resilience and collaboration, People Matters and Insights have brought together this exclusive webinar as part of the series Discover and Lead. In today's webinar, we will deliberate on the emerging need to invest in skills like innovation, resilience, learn how we can discover the potential of our workforce. You will also get a sneak peek into the Insights Discovery Color Energy model, and you will gain insights on how Vanderlande and Eli Lilly and Company have been able to make relevant development plan with a better awareness of their workforce. Now I take the pleasure to invite and introduce the speakers for today. Our first speaker is Mark, Head of New Markets, APAC, MEA, South America Insights. Mark is a South African based in Singapore and is responsible for expanding the Insights footprint in the Asia Pacific and Africa region. His passion is to play an instrumental role in creating a world where people truly understand themselves and others, and they are inspired to make a positive difference in everything they do. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rashmi Arya Chandar, Senior Manager, Continuous Acceleration Programs, Vanderlande. Rashmi is a versatile leader with hands-on experience in setting up HR operations from group up and enabling senior management to deliver organizational and strategic business goals within short lead times. She has delivered successful HR interventions, projects, and programs requiring extensive communications, collaboration, strategic HR, and digital transformation over geographically distributed teams in varied cultural environments. Welcome, Rashmi.
Thank you. Thank you, Drishti.
Next, we have Priya Prabhu, Associate Director, Human Resources, HRBP and L&D Talent Management from Eli Lilly and Company. Priya, with more than 14 years of experience, is responsible for aligning business objectives with employees and management for 5 key functions, that is commercial services, IT, scientific communications, business intelligence, and support. She heads L&D, Talent Management, and OD. Welcome, Priya.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, let me share with you a little bit about our partner for today's webcast, Insights. Insights is a people development company built to create a world where people truly understand themselves and others, and they are inspired to make a positive difference in everything they do. Centered around self-awareness, Insights people development programs help people, teams, leaders, and global organizations reach peak performance. No matter whether you need support with personal effectiveness, teamwork, leadership, or change, the learning journey with Insights will start with what's most important, dialing up the self-awareness of your people. Using a blend of Insights portfolio, their solutions are tailored to needs, helping you make an immediate impact where it's needed most, and supporting far into the future. Now, before we kickstart the discussion, let me remind our audience that, like always, we have saved time for you to ask questions at the end of the session. For those who are live, can simply submit post questions at any time during the session, and we will try to respond to as many questions as the time allows. Now, to kickstart the session without any delay, we start with addressing how the ongoing pandemic has brought with it anxiety, and a cloud of uncertainty is being cast all over us. And to address that, we start with our first poll. I request everyone to join menti.com and use the code 2602705. That's where you will see the first question of the poll. Let's first address what is causing us anxiety and stress today. Is it uncertainty and lack of clarity in business plans? Is it focusing on short midterm goals versus long term vision? Is it the long working hours for leading to fatigue, no distinction between personal and professional life? Or is it justifying performance and productivity? Or is it job security? Now we know that there could be more than one of these reasons, but if you were to pick one topmost reason that's causing anxiety and stress today, please use menti.com and the code 2602705. I think people should start sharing the responses now. So we'll allow people to share their inputs. And meanwhile, Mark, if we can start with you, what's keeping you up at night? What's causing you stress and anxiety? If together we can, address this.
Yeah, Drishti, while people are completing the poll, I'd love to see their views, but certainly what's not keeping me up at night is probably the question in a different way. And while thinking about this question, I think one of the big things for me is absolutely just this whole feeling of uncertainty. If only we were a fortune teller and we would know when we would get some sort of clarity and some sort of reality and some sort of real sort of concrete answer around when the world will correct itself and when the world will move to a different space. But I think both from a personal perspective and a business perspective, there's many things that keep me up at night, but I've sort of harnessed them into three categories, which I think are really, really important. And the first one for me is physical health, is how people retain and maintain physical health and how we look after ourselves. I don't think it's ever been more important around looking after your physical health. If you look at the different stats and the different numbers, more importantly than anything else is we need to build up our own physical resilience. And we all know from research that the more stress we're under and the more anxiety we're under, the more our immune system breaks down and the less resilience we have to viruses out there. So I think there's something for me around absolutely making sure you're staying fit, making sure you're not working long hours, and making sure you're managing your stress and knowing what your stressors are and what those stress mechanisms are, and to know when you're feeling stressed and to ultimately be able to sort of relax and move into a different space. So physical health for me is one of the things I think about. The other thing I think about is mental health. And I think about the loneliness and isolation that people are feeling and making sure that they don't get into that zone where they feel like they lost from the organization or apart from the organization. And even family members, my family's quite scattered around the world. I've got a sister in New York. I've got a brother in Joburg, got another brother in Glasgow, and I'm in Singapore. And so you can't straddle the world more, in terms of trying to stay connected with your direct family. So loneliness and isolation, I think, is a big thing for me. The other thing for me is how present I can keep my people. And, it's amazing how absenteeism used to be the sort of big buzzword in corporate organizations, and we measured engagement by how our people were at work and not away from work, absenteeism. For me, it's probably a very different thing now. And I look at my organization and I say, how present are my people? How engaged are my people? How inspired are my people every single day to carry on doing what they're doing? So they don't sit in a world where they're not sure what to do or how to react or how to sort of engage with different things. So I think of many ways I can keep people present, how I can keep them engaged, how I can keep them motivated and inspired. And then, of course, from a mental health perspective is depending on your preferences and depending on your resolve and depending on your drive, I think for some people it's really, really difficult to separate integration of work or integration of family. We were just talking offline, the panelists and myself, around how hard it is to separate what you're doing from a work perspective and a play perspective. And I find many days where I walk into my office at 9 o'clock and I might walk out my office at 10 o'clock that night. And that's, you need to manage and you need to make sure that you're protecting that in the right way, because it's a long game, not a short game. And then, not to pander on anything, I think the third thing that keeps me up at night is absolutely the financial and economic sort of backlash of this environment. I think we'd be amiss if we didn't speak about it. And I don't want to go into a sort of task or financial element, but often I think, especially in emerging markets, it's hard, the balance between welfare and well-being of people and potentially what we'll do to recover at the back end. And we're all aware of this. We're all aware that people are going through furloughs and people are going through retrenchments and people are going through redundancies. And I've got to just constantly say to myself, how do I keep my best foot forward to minimize the loss of people as much as possible, and to make sure that I'm looking after the welfare of people, because there's just so many added consequences to that. So,
Right.
in a nutshell, physical health, mental health, and the financial and economic piece are things that often do keep me awake at night.
Yeah, and we can see the responses also here. And as you spoke about, health and how it has become so important, we can see here that it's the distinction between personal and professional life, and that leading to fatigue. That's the topmost concern for people, and that's what's giving them stress. Although initially we saw uncertainty and lack of clarity in business plans also being, opted, but then I think the third option is the one it's the fatigue only that's causing us the maximum stress. So Rashmi, what are your thoughts on this? As you're seeing this poll, and you must have also faced similar stories, maybe, how to balance that professional life and personal life.
Yeah.
So if you can share your personal story with us on this.
For me, I was just thinking as Mark was speaking, what has been my learning over the last couple of months. I'm a very people person, so I really used to love and enjoy the interactions that we would have, in the face-to-face world. But I think the biggest learning for me was to learn to balance the personal and professional. I've been working for the last 20 years. Right after my engineering, I joined the army, so I was kind of working all these years, and I think this period kind of put a break on the whole run that we were busy with, in life, working and home and whatever. So for me, the whole thing about creating a balance between, even if you're sitting in the house, just having those slots of, okay, this is time for office, and then you make time for lunch and you make time for dinner. So for me, it was really nice to be able to connect with my daughters and the family during this time, was because then we all were at home. There was most of the time I would be traveling. My husband was elsewhere; he was in the army, and my girls would be doing their own thing. So we all were like kind of a scattered little family. So yeah, being able to keep those boundaries clear, that's one. But also not just for yourself personally, but also in a professional side, making sure that you slot your time well in your calendar, and make the time even for lunch, because it used to happen initially, that people even block your calendar for meetings even during lunchtime, because you're also dealing with a lot of people across the globe. So your lunchtime is not necessarily somebody else's lunchtime, and people would just forget the whole time frames that are existing. So you really need to I tried doing that, and that helped me. We also had a few colleagues who used to get up and go out for a walk during lunch and stuff like that. So that was really I think needed, because you're kind of stuck in the house, right, for a long time and long duration. Some of my best work happened during these initial months, and I think we use the quiet time, to really interact more deeply with the experts that we had to, because otherwise we were all like 5 or 7 of our IT architects, or everybody in the room. So there used to be a lot of discussion, but you really didn't have time to go back and assimilate what was discussed or put it down on paper and start working on it. But with this way of doing a one-to-one thing, and these calls were much more deeper and much more work got done during this time for us. So I think initially, yes, we did, didn't know how to deal with it. But then as we kind of adjusted to the new norm, as they call it, it was okay. I think I found my space right now, in the way to do it. just being able to balance and making yourself a priority to be able to give 100%. I think that's more important, because you can't be at all places at the same time. So you really need to plan where you want to be 100% when. So that's most important, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It has given us time to reflect and introspect. And interestingly, all the reports and research and everything is showing that productivity has somehow increased. And that's what people are talking about. So, Priya, what's your story? We would love to know your story as well. That, how are you dealing with stress currently?
Yeah, thanks so much, Drishti. And going after Mark and Rashmi, I completely resonate with what they've said. But if I were to look at, how it has been for me, in March when the pandemic hit India, work from home was new, and for me specifically, being in HR, because I'm so used to the accessibility to people and the people connections, it was very hard. It was, and I'm going to be very honest here. I'm sure it's the same case with a lot of us listening in as well. It was very hard to adjust. The first thing was to accept the fact that it is going to take some time to readjust your priorities, because that's not simple. I wondered about a lot of things, about how effective I would be in my role, how I would ever be able to get into a routine, because this was, everything was mixing up. The home space was not sacrosanct anymore. So one thing I also realized after 30 to 45 days, that how adaptable and how resilient we are as a human race, right? Because resilience is, what is resilience really? It's about bouncing back in the face of adversity. If you look at the world around us and the events that have transpired, we can actually see the examples of human resilience through the ages. Every generation has its share of adversity to deal with, whether it was world wars, whether it was the Holocaust, whether it was some war and strife. And for us, it's this, it's the pandemic, and we have to deal with it. uh, the pandemic has, I think, united us, the whole world, in a way that nothing else could have. Neither power nor money nor any amount of diplomacy nor wealth nor your promotions or a company. I think this has really brought us together and asked us to look at moments that matter. And that's, if I were to tell you how I've dealt with my stress and anxiety, is to look at the moments that matter to me truly, right? Because like Mark was saying, health is, if you don't have health, everything else, every other point is moot. So for me, I would say that the personal stress that I was feeling, I looked at and reflected and saw it for what it is, saw it for the moments that matter.
I think that was beautifully put, Priya, and that's truly right. I think what Rashmi said, we've got this time to reflect and then sort of prioritize and focus on what are the essentials, because we have truly understood that we can't control everything, and it has taught us and it has reminded us that change is obviously inevitable. So, and these triggers of stress and anxiety can't be ignored or avoided, but there are definitely many better ways to deal with it. As you said, what is resilience? It's about the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity. How we approach life and everything it can throw at us has a massive impact on our experience. So let's understand from our audience and you all as well that how can we deal with anxiety by building more resilience, and how can this resilience be really built that we talk about. So if the audience can share with us, first let's share with the audience the poll question. I think the second question would now be appearing on this screen in the same link, menti.com, and using the same code. The next question that we have is, how are you building resilience to manage with the stress? And here we have kept it open-ended for everyone to share what's working for them. And we want to crowdsource all those ideas, and we can help each other in this way, maybe. Or maybe what's working for you can work for us as well. So it's yoga, or is it setting goals and discipline, or is it spending more time with your family? Is it reading, or getting familiar with your old hobbies that you had, not given time to since a long time? So what is it that's working for you? Writing, family.
I think a lot of us are realizing that we've had hobbies that we forgot about.
That's true. That's true.
True.
Self-realization, someone has written.
It probably also, things that we loved as kids or as growing up, as teenagers, in college, probably with work, you kind of get busy, and kind of after kids, it even, kind of takes a back seat. but suddenly you have time to just sit and think, oh, I used to do something like that, and try and see if you can get back there, even if it was sketching with pencils, or I think all that has kind of emerged more like a stress buster for a lot of us. That you can doodle, you can do a lot of things just sitting there, which
Yeah.
had kind of just been forgotten for a very long time, or music for that matter, or dance, where you really
Yeah.
don't go around dancing in the office, but you can do that at home, right? While you're working, going from one room to another. So that's something you could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because one of the sort of probably where I had to build resilience, that was the most amazing experience, was homeschooling my children. And so actually having the chance to see them learn and see how they learn, especially in our world, guys, where we see our people learn all the time and our organizations learn all the time, and you sort of don't see that necessarily with your family.
Yeah.
And I just found it amazing just to watch their style and what they engaged with and what interested them, which was really, really special. And I see a lot of comments around family here, and I hope that remains something that we do remain focused on post-pandemic, because it's so easy, that you sort of move on with life and your family sort of takes a second sort of chance, and you got to get work. Your aspirations are different, and there's a lot here that we probably need to make sure we hold on to, whatever happens post this, I think, and moving forward.
Right, and
Yeah.
I agree with you, Mark. Specifically, when it's coming up that spending time with family is the topmost reason, and it's not surprising considering the fact that here's a real opportunity for us, and we should continue to capitalize on that.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always a silver lining, as they say. And if we just change our perspective, we can see that it was actually an opportunity to relook at everything that we are doing, how we are leading, how we are hiring, how we are managing talent, everything. Each decision, each conversation that we have with everyone, I think it has given us an opportunity to reflect on that. And on that note, Mark, if I have to ask you that what mental capacities do you think individual employees, teams, and leaders need to build to navigate through this uncertainty? While we've seen that on personal note, this has given us more time to reflect on family and getting back our hobbies. How do we bring this reflection to work, and how do we now work on our mental capacities, and what knowledge will lead us through these tough times?
Yeah, Josh, it's a really good question. And, some of the work we were doing pre this pandemic at Insights was this whole piece about sort of rediscovering humanity. And, especially in a technologically framed world and in a busy world where, it's all about timelines and deadlines and hitting results and that sort of thing. We were speaking a lot about this concept, rediscovering humanity. And I almost think it's so interesting how it's sort of flowed into that world, where I do think that human has become really, really important. And the whole conversation about what humanity is really, really important. And, a couple of things we talk about when we talk about this whole concept of rediscovering humanity is, as we, do believe, is that it all starts with self. And it's I don't know if many people in the rush of life and in the continuation of life spend much time reflecting on what their purpose is and what their guiding light is, and what their vision is. We always sort of are driven that way by something else. And I don't think we sit enough on the beach. My Afrikaans teacher used to always say to me, Mark, go sit on a rock and just think about life. That was really, really hard for me, And I think there's something just about understanding what you want from life and how you want to get it done. We know very, very importantly that attitude and effort are really, really important. So what is your attitude? How do you choose to show up? How do you choose to be? How do you choose to want to be? And what effort do you put in where that allows you to have holistic goals and achieve this full being? And again, just speaking offline, guys, is there's something about authenticity for me. Is finding your authentic voice, finding your authentic you, finding your real you. There's something, I think, Priya, you were saying, it's something about being vulnerable and really understanding what vulnerability is. You don't have to be the person who knows everything. And especially in a matrix world, and especially in a virtual world, if you're not going to have those vulnerable, real, authentic conversations, I think you're going to get found out towards time. And then one of my piece that I think is so important is the ability to be brave and to speak up. Leaders, well, they're looking for the sort of feeling of their teams. You need to speak up because people can't just tell that. It's very difficult to tell emotion on a screen and to see emotion on a screen. So more importantly now, you want people to be brave. And it works both ways. It's your leaders being brave to say, this is where I'm struggling. And it's your people being brave to say, this is not working for me, or how can we do this in a different way? And that to me speaks very much to owning your voice. Is it, no matter whether you're introverted or extroverted or degrees of, I think you need to own your voice. You need to be present. You need to be engaged. You need to put yourself forward. I saw one of the questions in the chat, about how do we build engagement for virtual teams. And, one of the things I think is so important is we don't have a call without people having their cameras on, because I think having a face-to-face conversation is really, really important. And seeing you, even though I can't see you in the whites of your eyes face-to-face, I can see you on a screen, and I can see your emotion, I can see your body language, I can see your reactions. So I really encourage people to own their voice, be present. The third thing for me, which is super, super important, is around finding your pace. And I found very much the front end of this pandemic, and I find it just generally when I work with teams around the world, but especially in stress and especially during the pandemic, some people absolutely froze like rabbits in a headlight and literally went, I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to carry on. And 3 months later, they were still frozen in the headlights. And literally they had lost 3 months because they didn't really find their pace. They didn't really know what to do with this. On the converse, I think you had people who just felt that if I was really, really busy and I continued to do things and I did 1,000 things and I worked 18 hours a day, this would just go away some way and we'd wake up in the morning, everything would be fine. And I think there is something around, just understanding, slowing down to speed up, pacing yourself for a sustainable journey. Taking that time just to breathe and go, what am I looking to do and how am I looking to do it, I think is really, really important. And that lead, once you've found your pace, once you've sort of decided to own your voice, I think we've got to be more conscious now than ever around building deeper relationships. If you think in your workplace, even when you're meeting in a workplace or you're meeting in a work environment, how well you really know the people in your workplace. And I think for me, it's really taking the time now to build those authentic conversations, those real core, real conversations that speaks to the heart of things. How many times do we ask people how their families are? How many times do we authentically ask a person, what's happening in their world? And I think more than ever, we've got such a sneak peek of everyone's homes, during this new world. And you suddenly get to realize how people live, because before you were sort of jaded a little bit because you saw them in the office, but you didn't know what they went home to. You sort of assumed everyone's worlds were the same as yours. So I really think building that deep relationship, I think is massively important. And then, of course, the final thing for me is just really relying on your extended community. So much of our workplace is our community, and it's not our community. Our community is our family. Our community is our church group. Our community is our schools where our kids go. Our community is so broad, and we sort of narrow our community very much into this sort of ring-fenced world. And I just think there's something about being conscious about where you spend your time and who you spend your time with, because it's not going to be just your work community anymore. I think you're going to have to rely on different communities, so volunteer work, which people have been spectacular about. There's nothing better than giving back, is there? That feeling. I mean, I think it's literally a chemical thing, when you give back and you do something that you didn't have to do, it's just the most powerful feeling. So what do we do to build that community and build that mental resilience? But core thing being heart at yourself and what am I really trying to do.
Those were some beautiful thoughts, Mark. I think thank you for sharing that. And now, as we are getting some questions also from the audience, like Viren and Rajita, they are asking that how do we build resilience in our teams? And Priya, if you can share, what's been working for you at LA Lilly, and how are you building resilient teams?
See, first things first, let's be honest, working virtually doesn't come naturally to everyone. It's not something like a switch that you just woke up one day and said, okay, from today I'm going to work virtually and I'm going to be damn effective at it. It doesn't work like that because people need additional help. And when I say people, I'm including myself, I'm including all of us. We need that additional support. We need those additional tips and tricks that help us navigate our way and make us more productive as we work in this virtual environment. So towards this end, we did a lot of stuff at Eli Lilly in terms of redesigning our learning and development curriculum and our onboarding journeys to make sure that this mind space for people to actually meet and greet, and we actually built this into the calendar because it's very easy to go from one session to the other, right? We have to be very intentional about how you design programs, keep it short, keep it visual, keep it interactive. Because let's be honest, on a virtual platform, there's just about an hour and a half. At best, I will get your mind space and your interest or the audience's interest. So we have to be very, very careful about that. I think that's one thing that if we really want to build these teams which bounce back, we have to be thoughtful about where they're coming from. The whole point around empathy comes into being, at this very juncture. And moreover, we use some very good tools. And I'll give you examples of two tools that we used. One tool was called Globe Smart, which was a tool for, culture profiling. It profiles your culture on 5 parameters in terms of how you interact as an individual from your perspective, and compares it to 170 countries around the world. And that was so useful because people really realize they have an additional data point to work with as they worked with teams outside of India. That's number one. Second thing is that we worked with the insights discovery folks, where it is a great tool for self reflection, and it looks at your personality in a very visual, color based manner. And this is a language of color that people can understand and people can relate to, right? So when we were able to use that with our leadership, a couple of things happened. One is our leadership, again, to going back to the point of vulnerability, we were able to really identify what are the drivers and derailers for each of us or each of our personalities. That's number one. Second, the report beautifully pulls out what are your stress triggers and how do you deal with that. And I thought that was very powerful because, sometimes you need to use a tool. Of course, tools are done to death and there are a bunch of psychometric tools in the market, but really picking the ones that matter, picking the ones that are going to add to your relevance and add to the business need at this point of time when everything is virtual, I think was key for us. So, in a nutshell, for us, we've had to redesign the way we learn, the way we deliver our learning, the way we onboard, by being very intentional about the communications that we provide, about the way we deliver our programs. So that's something that I would share with the group.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you. Rashmi, any thoughts on this? Like, how are you building resilient teams in your company?
I think the Oneland has been a very creative company, and especially during these times, I think that really helped because as a culture, we've always had creativity at the center, and innovation, of course. But even for innovation, you really need to have creativity, and from there, then the resourcefulness comes in. Especially during these times when there is stress, when there is negativity, when there is emotions or disconnect from people to people, or from an organizational perspective, how to keep the happy quotient up. And that was something that I think a lot of people within HR were thinking about and working towards. And of course, if I look at Wonderland, they have an intensely technical group, and then they have these creative HR community which tries to balance it out. So it's really the blue and the yellow energies that try to constantly come together, if I were to quote the insights way of working. And then of course you do have the reds in between who are really skeptical about whatever is coming in, or sometimes how can this really bring in the results, and really focused on to keep the business continuity going on. But small things for employees and small things for teams that worked were things like, having a virtual coffee or a virtual movie evening or a virtual gymming session. These kind of things really work, in addition, of course, to what we were doing. Even it I think by rule, we always spend the first 10 minutes or 5, 10 minutes in the start and at the end of a meeting to connect. And which initially, when we used to be, and in a face-to-face meeting, it was very agenda driven and people just came in prepared and we really didn't waste a lot of time. But this time, these 10 minutes in the start and the 10 minutes or 5 minutes at the end really brought out the productivity much higher, because people felt that they were there, and somebody really cared. So when Priya talks about empathy, when you talk about connectivity, that's something I think as leaders, having empathetic leadership during a time like this, to acknowledge the hassling times that somebody might have, and to make sure that everybody is present in that meeting or in that room, to concentrate on what we are going to talk. You really need to first connect emotionally to bring them mentally into the meeting. uh, Managers, I think, learned that over time. It doesn't come, of course, naturally to all of us as managers. But the good part about One Land was that we are, as a group itself, pretty creative, and I think that's from where most of these things keep coming up. For me personally, also, that works a lot, because I think if you are down and under, it's difficult to really think about ways and means to come out of, and to bring solutions to the table, be it technical, be it life, be it anything. So it's essential that your energy levels and your mindset needs to be in a happy mode, to be able to be creative and then to be resourceful, so you could come up with solutions for whatever you're doing. And for that, it's important to not always only think about what's going wrong. And yes, you need to acknowledge what is going wrong, or you need to really say, yes, this is hurting me, and this is really not working for me, and that's fine. But having a group of people listen to you, accept, and say that's okay, and that's fine, we understand, so whatever it is, let's work it out together. That part really, I think, helps people to feel accepted and welcome on the table, despite whatever is going on in their lives at that point in time. So it's more like a gentle nudge, I think, especially during these times, that which initially, I think, especially even in an Indian culture, we always keep it quite conservative, and we kind of used to say, okay, we don't deal with what's happening in your personal life at office. But the fact that you do acknowledge and you do check on these things, and you do say, okay, let's try to work around whatever your schedules are, and whatever your requirements are. If we have been able to do that, that has probably helped us a lot. Because yeah, everybody's at home, everybody has to deal with two situations, that's work and home, together at the same time, at the same place. So we really need to allow that space and moment and time for people to we want to really want to be contributing on the table. And without that, I think, without acknowledging and without allowing that space, it's not fair for the management leaders to expect uh, our teams to be able to bring their best to the table, I think. So while we're talking about courage, and while we're talking about vulnerability, I think both ways, for managers and employees, the whole part about managerial courage, the courage to be vulnerable, and from there on, then to really have the integrity to say, this is right, this is wrong, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. It's one whole flow of things that you really need to have as a whole environment and an ecosystem for people to be okay with whatever is happening and whatever they can and cannot do. And that's like really creating a safe base for people to just be who they are, and try and bring their best to the table. And if not, sometimes it's okay, it's just fine.
Yeah. To- to-
If I can just
yes,
add,
Srinath.
here just one point on the empathy piece, and I thanks Rashmi for reminding me, because the word empathy in general is done to death, and I see a lot of questions on how do you build resilience, how do you build empathy. It's really very simple, right? At the end of the day, it's about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and saying, okay, how would I react if I were in a situation like this? And towards this end, I come from a pharma company, and in the pharma company that I come from, the focus is on people's health. And so much so that the word caring is part of our organization's purpose. That's a part of the purpose, caring with discovery. So that is, I think, a crucial part. And I agree with Rashmi when she says, it has to come down to every level in the organization. It's not something that a leader says, okay, I will exhibit care. It's not something that you do overnight. It has to become a matter of habit. It has to become a matter of vulnerability. It has to become a matter of habit. It is not something that you can create overnight, and today I will be this and tomorrow I will be something else. I think that is the one way we can really help drive this resilience and drive the culture of empathy in our organization.
True. I mean, it also, I think, with managers, it also does not, many a times I see conversations going, okay, let's hear what's up with everybody. It's like, it's kind of becoming quite automated, or you really can't
Transactional
get,
in a sense.
it's transactional in a way. You really can't get somebody to open up to you unless you have energetically, allowed that space for somebody to be willing to open up to you as a manager. And that comes with making sure that there's an authentic and genuine interest in knowing what's happening. It cannot be a verbal communication or verbal, a transactional statement, opening statement, and an icebreaker that you say, hey, let us know what's happening with you.
Right.
So I have seen that happening many a times, and I think as managers, we should refrain from getting into a position of supremacy, where we kind of end up asking people, okay, tell me about what's happening, or update me about what's happening. Rather, let when the employees start talking, it will emerge who's dealing with what, or and then from there on move on. Spend some time initially before we just jump into the details of what the whole topic of discussion or meetings are. And believe me, if we take time to pause, we will speeden up soon after. I mean, the initial pause is to speeden up. So the time to pause is most important initially.
That is true.
Right. So speaking on leadership, Mark, anything that you would also like to add on? As we are saying, and we saw that it's the lack of clarity also that's giving people anxiety, and it also got quite a few votes. And as everyone is talking about, having those authentic conversation and being transparent, and what else could they do? What should leaders really be careful about going forward as things become and continue to remain uncertain?
Yeah, Trishti, I think it's a really good one. I'm really glad you've led out with something like transparency, open and candid, and those sort of pieces, because I think what we've got to realize as an organization is, just as much as people in the organization, so leaders also don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or in a week's time or in a month's time. And I think the ability of the leader to build the fact that organizations follow them and respect their view and respect that they are being totally transparent and honest and doing the best they can for the organization, that's massively important. So, we throw away things like building trust and building cohesion. And often when we're in the depths of focusing on driving for results, we don't think about those things. And I just think, and one of the thoughts that we have as an organization is that I believe that centered leadership and relational leadership will become real core leadership traits going forward. I think we've moved so much and so quickly away from this strong task leader, which took us to the results, took us to the outcomes, short-term leadership. So it was all about one financial year, make it the best year possible. And then we sort of moved to sort of triple bottom line, and we spoke about, sort of sustainability, how strong is your balance sheet, how you're moving forward. And now I think, we've really moved, people used to speak about sort of human capital like it was a thing, and it's human, but it's not the capital part, So I almost think that leaders' attraction is going to be really, really powerful. One thing we do know is that there's super talented people out there, but these super talented people pick where they want to work, they pick how they want to work, and they pick in what way they'll work. And I think the more human leaders are and the more human organizations are, I think that's going to be really, really powerful. People will choose where they want to work, and people will choose how they want to work. And we will not be working in offices probably in 20 years' time. It will have to be very much the self-starter, self-driver in a space where you work from. And that probably just brings me to my second point, which I think is going to be really tough for organizations, and a real tough leadership piece is how you sustain culture and how you sustain what the culture in that organization is. Because a lot of culture work is done in the physical realm of an organization. So when people come into your offices, we brand offices in a particular way. We have meetings in a particular way. We do things in a particular way. And as leaders, we're going to have to be really aligned behind what the culture of that organization is, and have the ability to take that into the organization. So culture work is really, really important for me. The other thing for me, which is massively important, and not enough of us as leaders really get it, but I think the advent of technology is going to be really important. It's not just about being able to open your laptop and work on it anymore. It's going to be about understanding how I can connect in different ways and how I use those connections in different ways. So when I came out to Asia, for example, I couldn't believe how prevalent WhatsApp was in the business world. So when you have business conversation, you speak on WhatsApp, and then you only mail when it really gets technically quite into the depth of a conversation. And the ability to cross over between different forms of technology, I think, is going to be really, really important. How you move between WhatsApp and Zoom and Teams and FaceTime and just picking up the phone normally, I think is going to be really important. Communication skills. How often we communicate. How do we communicate? There was a great question in a chat from Viren where he speaks about dysfunctional collaboration. And that's a real challenge for leadership, because I think as human beings and as organizations, we extreme behavior sometimes. So I can bet in most organizations, when we went into the first stage of the pandemic, everyone tried to overcompensate. And you probably found yourself on 1,000 meetings, because you had a meeting with your functional leader, you had a meeting with this leader, you had a meeting with this leader. Eventually, your whole diary was just having meetings, because we really overcompensated on trying to stay close, stay cohesive, stay connected. But some people love that, and some people don't enjoy that. And in fact, for some people, that's an absolute stress mechanism. So managing how you communicate, how you interact, I think is going to be very, very important. And then the big one for me, which I think is going to be cutting edge in our new world, is we've been tethering on the edges of outcome-based working for a long period of time. And we've been talking about people not having to come into work and outcome-based. And we've been playing with this concept, I think, for about 10 years now. And I think this is the moment now where we've got to get really good at this. We've got to set what people's roles and responsibilities are. We've got to set what their performance metrics are. We have to be able to measure them really, really accurately, because the problem with outcome-based working is the fact that when people overachieve and has lots of time off, the organization feels a little bit punished. And when the organization potentially sets the parameters quite high and the person can't achieve them, the individual feels punished. And we've got to find that balance somewhere, because gone are the days of watching how people perform because they come in at 8 and they leave at 5. It's going to be very much about how we set these outcomes and how we set these performance pieces. And then the last piece for me is how we manage in a flexible way, because I know from working with a team which is quite broad time zone based, it's challenging. But for the first time now, we're going to have leaders where potentially people will say, I'll start work at 12 and I'll finish at 10 tonight. Or I'll start work at 4 in the morning and I'll finish work. And in order to have talent and the way we can work, that's going to become more and more available. So the ability for the leader to connect with their team, build trust with their team when everyone's working on different time zones or in different ways, I think is going to be really powerful. But great times, and just listening to Priya and Rashmi just talking just now, there's a way we need to put a positive spin on what's happened in this COVID-19 thing, and because it's been a catalyst for some amazing stuff. If you think about how many things have been sitting for a period of time, waiting to happen, waiting to accelerate, in a way, COVID-19 has forced organizations to do that. So, I think there's a meme going around at the moment where it talks about who drove your digital strategy, and is it your CEO, is it your CTO, or is it COVID-19? And so I think, the way of learning, Priya, you'll know, we've been talking a long time about, how we make learning more accessible to people, how we make it bite-sized chunks, how we make it available when people need it. And I think this is going to just force the world to sort of change the way they do things, which for me is a real positive.
Yeah, I think that we just have 9 minutes left now, and those are some good points that you've made, and we actually got some questions that you've already answered in a way, so I don't have to pick them up, I think, because people were talking about being, dealing with people who some are okay with collaborating, some are not. Some days, it's different for them, that how they deal with situations and how they look at things like collaboration, trust, and do they want to, small things like, does someone want to, switch on the video or not when they are in a call? Very, very small things. And as Priya said, I think moments that matter, we go back to that. I think these have now actually become some small little things that make a lot of difference now. So Priya, just to add on to what points Mark made, if you want to share some things here, how in a new hybrid environment that we will now work in, what are some non-negotiables?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think that's a great one, because really it's about, being able to prioritize ruthlessly. So if it is a non-negotiable, I think the first piece for me will be culture. Mark spoke about it briefly, and I would tend to agree, because really an organization is defined by the culture that it has, right? And the culture pieces are more, they are not very overt in that sense, because that's something that has to be weaved into all your people practices and policies which are there across the organization. As a personal example, in Eli Lilly and Company, in the pandemic alone, once we went on lockdown, we have onboarded virtually more than half the organization. It's a significant number of people. And while we have done that, we realize that culture assimilation is going to be the make or break for us. And how do we do this? It's by the power of storytelling. In learning and development, we have this famous 70-20-10 model, which is 70% learning on the job and 20% learning from others and 10% training. But oftentimes it is reversed. We sort of take the 10% to be the 70%, meaning to say we focus on the training without focusing on the application part. So one of the things that we are very, very intentional about is how do you utilize the power of storytelling in order to drive those changes and drive that culture that you want to drive. As an L&D head, I can tell you nothing is as powerful as a personal experience, and this is where the leaders come in. So we can do as many training programs and other kind of interventions and do a checklist of virtual engagement activities, but really the value or the proof of the pudding is when a leader shares his or her personal experience of how they overcame a challenge, how they were not able to find a solution to a big problem they had in their career, how they built their careers, how there were ups, downs, etc. I think those are the learning moments. That is number one. That's the non-negotiable number one. And as Mark said earlier, there are various needs that employees have. One is the physical needs, which is in terms of the infrastructure, etc. Mental needs, that is the permission to work differently, permission to work at a different time zone, or to wake up early in the morning and work, or work later in the night. So the concept of core hours will not and should not exist anymore. I think that's a non-negotiable now for us. We need to continue to evolve our HR framework to address not only the physical needs and the mental needs, but also what I call as the relationship needs, which is a social piece. That need not necessarily happen in a work front. We need to enable those communities of practice, whether it is on a Zoom call, whether it's on a WhatsApp call, whatever works. And I think technology will play a key part here as we move along. leadership has to evolve with the future of work. Now the future of work is changing. Now we know that office space is something that is, and in India we can see so many office spaces lying empty today, because the whole concept of workforce planning and workspace planning has taken a hit. It's a tectonic shift in the way that we are thinking. I was reading an article about 3 years ago which spoke about the future of work and the future of the workspaces, etc. The reality of it is the future of work is now. We've been forced to look at the future of work now. The time is now. So I think leadership in being able to be adaptive, and going back to our first point on resilience, being able to be resilient in the face of this ever changing VUCA world, I think that's going to be the third piece, according to me. Right? So I'll leave it to Rashmi now to comment.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think,
Rashmi.
yeah, for me, during this whole phase, I think, especially when we are disconnected in such a large way, communications is the most not, the most critical thing, and the way it happens. So whether it is written, whether it's verbal, whether it's print, all the communication going out from HR, from management, from leaders towards the organization needs to be extremely clear, concise, and because there could be, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation, right? Especially during these times, uh, people are not sure what is being discussed, and then it kind of keeps moving from one level to the next level, and could be interpreted very, very differently, especially during the phase where the entire organization is anxious. There are things happening in different pockets around the world within the organization. So it is important that common communications are extremely well drafted and sent out well timed, because that can also play a lot of positive or negative influence on how people see or understand what's happening within the organization. Also, frequent communication, and from one central agency helps bring in certain amount of predictability and expectancy. So people kind of, when everything else is unpredictable, when everything else is ambiguous, when you know that, okay, there is an agency which is taking care of this and is letting us know about what is happening, I think that brings about certain amount of predictability and stability within the current current phase. So for me, communication is critical, the most critical. Thereon, also transparency in what is happening, good or bad, and that I would link to managerial courage and integrity, for managers to be able to say, hey, this is not going right, and these are the steps that we are taking. The more, as management, if we kind of try to suppress things or put things down, or kind of sugarcoat things, everybody is intelligent. We hire mostly good people in our organization, and I mean, really cannot sweet talk our population. So managers need to have courage and integrity to be able to speak the truth of what is happening at what time, and what is or could happen. I think even when we look at layoffs happening, if we were to go honestly to a group of people and say, this is what is happening, and we do not see business coming in, let's work out a way to ease things out. That works much better than trying to tell them, okay, this is the, I think you're not doing a great job. So many a times you see managers putting it on the performance of a department, or of an employee, which leaves bad taste. So everything, what has happened good could go bad if you do it in the wrong way. So for me, transparency, uh, communication, that's one part. Also, the clarity of intent and vision from the management coming up. When you look at long-term planning and short-term planning, usually organizations have been planning like 5 years ahead in time. What's the strategy? Where's the organization going 3 years down the line? We brought that back now to almost every quarter. What is changing? Because and COVID has pushed organizations to plan and strategize on a quarterly basis, and you never know, maybe it changes the next quarter. As long as we say that that's what is happening and that's what we are going to do, that's fine, because there's no point planning way ahead and then saying, hey, this is not happening. Because the more you show, the more hopeful the rest of the organization is. So either you already show what we are sure of, or you say that this is going to change soon. So the intent is also something that needs to be communicated and divulged very clearly to the employee group. And as lastly is flexibility, which Priya also mentioned is, and at that I would club with the use of technology to allow a work environment and infrastructure which allows people to work in whatever way possible and best suited for them, without doubting or without trying to create questions about where and when, and certain mandatory meetups or coffee mornings or whatever. I mean, everybody knows what they need to deliver, right? I mean, all our engineers and all our people do know what they need to deliver. So somewhere we need to allow that flexibility for people to kind of work in whatever way they want to. And even if somebody is not in the mood to switch on the video, I really don't think that really affects the output, depending on if the person is still available for the call. So these, for me, communications, intent, and vision, and flexibility. That's for me the non-negotiables to at least continue the business in a way that it's moving forward. Um, and of course, the rest of the things in terms of culture and stuff is something that is going to need and take a long time to ensure that we kind of settle into this new way of working, because that's something that will always
Right.
be with. That's going to be the foundation on which an organizational success would probably be determined over a period of time after we come out of COVID also. I think that's going to be
Absolutely.
true now. Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it was a great conversation, and we have actually exceeded the time as well. And I think we can go on and on about this because there's so much to talk about here, and so many things to address, and so many things. But I think the theme that we all can agree with is that it all begins with awareness of ourselves, of others, and how together then we can better understand each other and work together and sail through this crisis as one. So it all comes back to that. Thank you so much, Mark, Priya, and Rashmi, for this great interaction. It was a pleasure having you here. And with this, we come to the end of the session. I would also like to thank our partner, Insights, for making this session super successful. I hope the audience had a great time too. Please share your feedback with us. I think you can see the survey link in the comment section. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next time and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you,
Thank
Drishti.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
very much.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Priya.
Bye.